When emergencies hit, you have to move quickly. If someone goes into cardiac arrest, you immediately start chest compressions to keep oxygen flowing to their brain until help arrives with a defibrillator to restart their heart. You stop the bleeding first before worrying about broken bones. But as I sat on my back porch, I had no idea where to begin. This was unfamiliar territory, and I was caught off guard. I've always been a sharp observer in my job as a critical care nurse, picking up on the smallest signs of a patient's decline and acting fast to save them. But somehow, I completely missed the signs that my 18-year marriage was crumbling. Not that I had any plans to fix it. I wanted to end it and make it hurt, though I thought better of it later, realizing there was no need to drag anyone else down with me when I went after my cheating wife and her lover. I took a slow sip of beer, considering my next move, while my eyes wandered around the backyard. The lawn stretched out from the patio down to the edge of the bayou, dotted with a few scattered trees. My house, a classic Southern style with all the modern updates, was a gift from my dad and grandfather when I got engaged. This land had been in the family for generations, and the house was built by the family's construction company. Instead of joining the business, I chose nursing, a decision that initially disappointed my father. Still, I managed to afford a few luxuries like a boat and fishing gear, and I made it a point to take my family on trips whenever I could. Family always came first, and now that priority was in jeopardy. Looking across the yard, I noticed my sister's house, which was practically identical to mine, standing right next door. I decided it was time for a talk and called her over. "Isn't it a bit early for a drink, Connor?" "It's only 2 in the afternoon," she said, eyeing the beer in my hand. "I'm off for the weekend and in the mood," I replied. She knew how my work schedule gave me plenty of time off, and how I like to keep a cooler nearby to avoid constant trips inside. I offered her a drink, and she sat down. "So, what's going on? You told me not to call anyone until I talked to you," she said, sounding concerned. "I found out Lila's cheating on me," I confessed, my voice shaking as I said it out loud for the first time. "Are you sure? Maybe it's just a sick prank," she said, trying to reason, but I nodded, knowing it was no joke. "There's no doubt. It came with a video," I said. "The email just said, 'You should know your wife is cheating. Here's proof.' And it was signed by someone going by Pissed Off 999. Chloe's face went red with rage. "That cheating cow. Doesn't she realize who she's messing with? You'll destroy both her and that guy. Do you know who it is?" I started to answer, but she cut me off before I could say anything. "If Grant ever cheated on me, I'd tear him apart. How the hell does Lila even have the time for this? She's home almost every night, and when she's not, it's at those bachelorette parties where I'm always with her. Plus, she works with Grant and they usually drive together. He'd definitely notice if she was sneaking off." Suddenly, her face went pale, like she had just pieced it all together. "No way," she said, horror dawning on her. "She's cheating with my husband." The weight of the words hung in the air as her face flushed with anger, and tears filled her eyes. I reached out and hugged her, trying to soften the blow. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to just drop it on you like this," I said. "I've had a couple of hours to process it, and at least I'm calm enough not to grab a gun." She cried for a few moments but quickly collected herself. "All right, so what do we do now? Do we wait for them and confront them face to face?" she asked, still furious. "I love Grant, but I'm not putting up with this. We have to be smart about this," I told her. "Act like everything is fine tonight, just like we did yesterday. When they come home, we'll greet them like nothing's wrong. Maybe even with a kiss." Chloe frowned. "You can't be serious. We need a real plan. We'll talk to a lawyer tomorrow. At least we don't have to worry about STDs." I joked, trying to lighten the mood with a smirk. "Are you kidding me?" she shot back. "I didn't even think about that. And for the record, nothing's happening with Grant right now. I just started my period." She laughed through her tears, tossing her empty beer can aside. "Lila can have him because he's not getting anything from me. We can't let the kids find out just yet," I warned. "They left for Mom and Dad's earlier this morning, and I don't want them knowing anything's wrong before we figure out what to do." She nodded. You're right. They'll be devastated. But we can't keep it from them forever. My thoughts drifted to the kids. My son Logan, 17, and my daughters Connor, Trent, Ellie, and Maya, all 16. They were practically raised together, spending every summer like siblings, especially during the pandemic when they were always around each other. Grant had been a good father and uncle, involved in everything from their education to their hobbies. I took charge of the outdoor activities, teaching them how to camp, fish, and hunt. We'd often camp in the backyard before venturing deeper into the swamp, and as they grew older, they joined me on fishing trips. Lately, Grant had been letting his sons handle the boat while he stayed behind at home. A few weeks ago, I adjusted my work schedule to get 6 days off in a row, and I took the girls in one boat while the boys took another. We spent the week at Popo's old fish camp, bonding over fishing and crabbing. I thought we were growing closer as a family, but clearly Lila and Grant had other priorities. The idea of breaking the news to the kids was gut-wrenching. Family meant everything to me, and I couldn't bear the thought of tearing it apart because of Lila and Grant's betrayal. We'll have to tell them eventually, Chloe said, breaking the silence. But we can hold off for now, make sure they don't pick up on anything right away. I can't let this slide, I replied. I don't care what Lila says. Cheating is something I'll never forgive. Same here, Chloe agreed. I can handle a lot, but infidelity isn't one of them. We just need to figure out how to get rid of them without losing everything. I can't go to jail, and I'll be damned if she takes the kids away from me. I won't hurt Grant either, she added. The kids need me. I cracked open another beer, mulling over our options. I know, but we'll make them pay. I'm taking Grant for everything he's got. Child support, alimony, the works. I agreed. Grant earned more, so Chloe had a better chance. Lila could drive me to the pen, as courts often favor women in divorce cases. In my job, I handle trusts and wills, but I know enough about the law to say our assets are protected, Chloe said. Our houses are safe. Dad gave them to us before we married, so Lila and Grant can't claim them. Lila might try to stay in your house until the kids are grown, but she can't claim it. Didn't you and Lila sign a prenup? Dad insisted it said if either party cheated, they'd only get 20% of joint assets and no alimony. Lila's father, a wealthy plastic surgeon, had insisted on the prenup. He wasn't thrilled when I got his daughter pregnant, fearing I'd take half his fortune. My father also made Chloe and Grant sign a similar agreement. I'm worried about that video of Grant and Lila, Chloe said. Who filmed it and how? There were at least 3 cameras, I said. The video I got showed the same event from different angles, suggesting it wasn't edited yet. Neither Grant nor Lila seemed to know they were being recorded. Chloe insisted I show her the video on my tablet. Holy crap, she exclaimed. Grant and Lila's comments in the video about how Chloe and I were clueless infuriated her. Grant is done, but we need to find out who in the video about how Chloe and I were clueless infuriated her. Grant is done, but we need to find out who made the video. I don't want it coming back to haunt us. I don't care if the world sees it as long as it doesn't affect us. I agreed, suggesting we hold off on a public reaction. Chloe sat silently, pondering our next steps, then began to sob. I hugged her, and we both cried, unable to hide our pain anymore. That night, I met Lila at the door, hugging and kissing her. I half expected her to pull away, but she kissed me back. I couldn't detect any trace of aftershave, just her perfume. Despite my anger, I told her dinner was ready. Chloe and I had already planned takeout, neither of us wanting to cook. We joked about poisoning our spouses, but it was a way to vent, not a real option. The next morning, I watched Lila get into Grant's car. I called Chloe. How'd it go? No Picanorlam, she replied. Joking and planning helped me keep my cool. Any idea where they're going tonight? Chloe, always a bit of a loose cannon, needed to vent. We had to be honest about our feelings. At 10 a.m., we were in the office of one of Chloe's bosses. Max, of a loose cannon, needed to vent. We had to be honest about our feelings. At 10 a.m., we were in the office of one of Chloe's bosses. Max, a divorce attorney and an old friend. He agreed to represent us. Are you sure you have a video showing both parties? He asked. We assured him we did, but chose not to show it yet. As long as you have evidence of infidelity, you're good. Your prenuptial agreements are strict. Connor, did you consult a lawyer before signing? I explained that my father insisted on a legal opinion, and Chloe used the same document. Max continued. The cheater only gets 20% of joint assets, including savings and investments. There are no provisions for personal income accounts. Do either of you have any hidden income? We shook our heads. What if Lila has money she didn't tell me about? I asked. Common property, Max replied. Like if you bought something without telling her. Home improvements can be tricky. Your homes are protected because they were gifted before marriage. But things like solar panels might be considered common property. So she only gets 20% because she's a cheater, right? I asked. I'm willing to give her that. We can negotiate the division of furniture and other items. She'll have to pay for transportation and storage if she wants to take anything.
Max grinned.
These are the games we'll play. The important thing is your ironclad prenups as long as you prove infidelity. Keep the video copies hidden and confidential. If they sue over the video being public, it depends on how it was obtained. Be careful. He emphasized the need for discretion. Chloe and I nodded. We had considered editing the video and sharing it with our friends and family, but we were worried about the impact on our children. Now, we were more determined to find out who filmed it. We decided to serve the divorce papers on Thursday at noon, but I suggested waiting until Friday afternoon so they would have to worry all weekend without legal advice. Max convinced us to stick with Thursday, saying it would save costs and still keep them busy with financial statements all weekend, likely increasing their legal fees. Initially, we wanted to serve them in person to watch their reactions, but Max advised against it. Instead, we decided to serve them in person to watch their reactions, but Max advised against it. Instead, we decided to serve them at work in front of their colleagues. After leaving Max's office, we went to the bank to transfer money into new accounts in our names only, ensuring we had statements for all accounts. We paid off and canceled credit cards, opening new ones in our names only. I checked my email and found 3 more videos of Lila and Grant. I thanked the sender and asked how they got the videos, expressing concern about them going public. I secretly wished they would be released, but knew we had to be cautious to avoid a lawsuit. An hour later, I received an email with an address, 9203 Victoria Street, apartment 201. I visited the address and convinced the woman at the counter to give me information by implying the tenant was involved in criminal activities. She gave me the details. The apartment was rented by the insurance company where Grant and Lila worked, with Grant's signature on the contract. I wondered how the company would react if they found out they were paying for Grant's affair. Lila called me at 12:30, furious about the divorce papers. I calmly told her I knew she had found someone else and was setting her free. We had rehearsed our responses. Lila angrily denied the affair, accusing me of believing rumors and threatening to take everything in the divorce, including custody of the kids, child support, and half of our assets. Lila had the audacity to suggest Grant could move in with her, and I could just shack up with Chloe, as if I'd enjoy imagining what they were doing in my own home. Go ahead, I said, my voice barely steady. Get yourself a lawyer. I was fighting hard to keep my emotions in check, torn between the deep regret of my marriage crumbling and the boiling rage at her refusal to face the truth. The whole time, I hoped Chloe hadn't said too much to Grant. By the way, Chloe told me the kids were already packing Lila's things. Everything will be out front by the afternoon, she said. We got a restraining order and changed the locks this morning. She's not setting foot in this house until the court says otherwise. Lila started yelling as usual, so I hung up on her. I wasn't in the mood to deal with her tantrum. 10 minutes later, Chloe texted, "Backyard. Bring your cooler and make sure it's full." When I got there, she was already sipping on a beer, shaking her head in disbelief. "That moron Grant," she began. He tried to blame the whole thing on some secretary spreading gossip. I told him Lila pulled the same stunt. He kept denying everything, said it's all lies. "What did you say?" I asked, settling down with my drink. I told him to come get his stuff, but warned him to call first because I had a loaded gun. She smirked. Max was supposed to show up soon with a couple of deputies to make sure things didn't get out of hand. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how smart that was. Grant could easily bait me into losing my temper, and the last thing I needed was to be locked up for assault. I'm glad you talked to the kids earlier, Chloe continued. I don't think I could have held it together. Earlier, we'd gathered the kids to explain what was happening. Surprisingly, they took it in stride and immediately started packing up Lila and Grant's belongings. I guess they'd seen this coming. They handled it better than I expected, Chloe said, still a bit stunned. Maybe it just hasn't hit them yet, or maybe they don't fully understand how big of a change this is going to be. Just then, my phone buzzed with an email. I bet it's from Pissed Off 999, I said, pulling it up. Chloe leaned in as I opened the attachment. It was an audio file and we both sat in silence, listening. Lila's voice came through first. Can you believe Ethan and Chloe served us? They must have figured something out. I can't wrap my head around it. Ethan was so sweet to me last night. Relax, Grant said. They don't know anything. It's pecan-erably just someone gossiping about us having lunch or driving around together. We just need to deny everything. If they go through with the divorce, we'll make them pay for it. I know a lawyer who'll help. Just don't admit to anything. Assume everything you say is being recorded. When the file ended, Chloe and I just looked at each other for a moment. Let them think we don't know, I said, shaking my head. Grant mentioned they've been plotting something for a while. We need to be ready in case they pull something illegal. Chloe nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. We have to stay strong. I know, she whispered. Max said I'm in a better position. Courts tend to side with women, but the thought of Lila getting custody of Logan and Maya, and living in your house until Maya turns 18. Ugh. Even with the prenup, it makes me sick to think of her staying there rent-free while you're stuck paying child support. I felt the same way, but instead of voicing it, I just hugged her as she cried. I tried to reassure her that we'd come out on top, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. Divorce isn't about winning. It's about walking away with as little damage as possible. When we got back inside, the kids were still hard at work. Maya and Ellie were tossing Lila's clothes into plastic garbage bags, not even bothering with the suitcases anymore. I told them to take pictures of everything. They'd come in handy when we divided up assets later. Over at Grant's place, the boys were nearly done packing. He didn't have much, and they were shoving his clothes into bags without a care in the world. I couldn't help but smile when I saw Connor cramming a $2,000 suit into one of the bags like it was nothing. The kids clearly had my back. Lila texted me again, and I decided to call Max. He showed up soon after with 2 deputies in tow. Just sit back and enjoy the show, he said. Lila and Grant arrived, and to my surprise, they brought along an old enemy, Coltonks Dupre, a bully from my school days. I hadn't seen him in years, but he looked the same, still oozing arrogance. Hey, Ethan, Coltonks said with a smirk. Heard you're having some trouble with your wife and son-in-law. If I'd had a weapon, I might have used it right then. But Coltonks was a huge guy, and I wasn't about to get into a fistfight with him. We're just working through it, I said, keeping my voice level. You don't really believe my boy Grant is messing around with your wife, do you? Coltonks asked, that smug grin never leaving his face. That's exactly what I believe, I replied, my patience wearing thin. Max stepped in, sensing the tension, and stood a little closer to me. Lila, meanwhile, started ranting about how I drained our bank accounts. You took all the money. Yes, I said calmly, and I've got statements to prove what's yours. You'll get your share. She didn't seem to realize her credit card was already useless. When it came time for them to head inside, Chloe and I stayed outside. Maya and Ellie followed Lila with a deputy to make sure nothing funny happened. Logan and Connor trailed Grant, making sure he didn't pocket anything he wasn't entitled to. Then Lila demanded, "Where's my jewelry?" That was a sore subject. Over the years, I'd spent at least $25,000 on jewelry for her. Most of it was locked in my safe, and I'd taken pictures for insurance purposes, just in case. Coltonks tried to stir up trouble. but I quickly shut him down, explaining the photos were just to keep track of everything and prevent anything from disappearing. Max chimed in and suggested we get everything appraised again. After talking it over with Coltonks, Lila begrudgingly handed over her jewelry. "Where am I supposed to go now, you jerk?" Lila snapped. I nearly told her to crawl back to that love nest on Victoria Street, but bit my tongue. Instead, I shrugged. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. Days ago, I was heartbroken over this woman. Now, I felt nothing but anger and disgust. Eventually, Lila and Grant left, with Coltonks tailing them. Max gave me a knowing smile. Let's hope they head to that apartment. If we reveal it now, it'll be good leverage for us. But they ended up going to a Holiday Inn near their office instead. I actually laughed as I helped move their things into the hotel room. After that, I knew I'd need more flash drives to back up all the audio and video evidence we had. Later, while Chloe and the girls were in the kitchen making dinner, my phone buzzed with another email. Chloe followed me to the computer as I opened it. Coltonks' voice came through again. "All right, guys. Someone's pecan-ably following Ethan. Stay at a motel and make sure you get a room with 2 beds. Make sure both beds look used," Coltonks instructed. The investigator could easily bribe the maid to check. "We'll say you two are just sharing a room to save some cash." Grant jumped in, sounding irritated. "It was embarrassing when my card got declined. Good thing I brought extra cash. What's the next move?" "I'll call the credit card company and open a new account," Grant continued, but Coltonks wasn't done. "Ethan's pecan-ably thought about the jewelry," he warned. "I bet he has a full inventory. You better protect any hidden assets. Technically, they're considered community property, but what Ethan and Chloe don't know about, they can't claim. Don't hide too much, though you don't want to get caught. If you have a secret account, make sure it's got just a small amount. Offshore is always better. You really don't want to be caught lying under oath." "What now?" Lila asked, sounding nervous. "They can pecan-ably track down our Baton Rouge accounts." "Forget that," Grant said. "We'll fly to the Cayman Islands and open an account there. Make the room look lived in, wet the tissues, mess up the towels, wet the shower, use some shampoo. I'll call the office and let them know we're off tomorrow." The audio cut off. Chloe let out a long sigh. "So they have secret accounts?" she asked. "Where's this money coming from? I look at all the bank statements. There's no way he's hidden that much." I felt the same way. Lila and I both got $50 a week for travel cash, and we went over the credit card statements together every month. I'd bluffed when I told the apartment woman Grant was into pills and escorts, but now I wondered, was he hiding more than we thought? We decided to drop it for the night and sat down with the kids for dinner. At this point, there wasn't much we could do about secret bank accounts. The next morning, I headed over to Max's office, having arranged for a jewelry appraisal and an estimate for my firearms from a local dealer. Chloe went to work for a bit before meeting me at Max's office. When we were all together, I played the audio files from the day before. Max leaned back in his chair. "I'd really like to know who's sending these recordings," he said. "How they managed to bug Lila and Grant at the hotel is beyond me. No private investigator could work that fast. We may need to get a judge's order to dig into their bank accounts, which means possibly hiring an investigator." He asked if either of us had noticed any missing money, and Chloe and I both shook our heads. "If you're looking for a quick divorce, we can push things along," Max said. "Next week, we'll meet with Lila, Grant, and their lawyer to list out the assets, then take it before a judge. Louisiana's Napoleonic laws make divorces easier, especially with solid proof of infidelity. There's no need for counseling. Once the judge rules, you've got a 6-month wait, and it's over." Max added, "Oh, and Coltonks called, demanding you release an extra 30% of the money you withdrew." I smirked. I reminded him the prenup says the cheater only gets 20% of joint assets. Max chuckled. He asked for proof of the affair, which we'll present in court. It was almost fun watching him squirm. I'd love to see that audio of him advising Grant to hide money offshore come up in court. That weekend, I had to work, but I was debating how to handle my shifts. The head nurse, Sharon, couldn't cover for me. What if I start coughing and need a COVID test? I joked. Idiot, Sharon replied with a smirk. Yes, I'll cover your shift. You've got vacation and sick days saved up. Take some emergency time if you need it. I can't believe Lila pulled this on you. How about this? I suggested. You cover my weekend, and I'll start my vacation on Monday. Really? Thank you. I owe you one, Sharon said, sounding relieved. I'll put in for your sick leave, then your vacation. Take all the time you need and keep me updated. Honestly, work felt like an escape. Weekends were always busy, and in the ICU you have to stay sharp. I didn't expect to see my father-in-law, Dr. Thibodeau, waiting for me at the nurse's station. Hello, Dr. Thibodeau. What brings you to the ICU? I asked, already feeling the staff's curious eyes on us. Cut the crap. We need to talk, he hissed. Once we were in the head nurse's office, he didn't waste any time. What's this I hear about you kicking Lila out? She called her mother in tears. John, I found out Lila is having an affair, I said bluntly. She's cheating on me with my sister's husband. I'm in the middle of a family disaster. He shook his head. It's just a rumor started by office gossip. They commute together and have lunch sometimes. Lila told us those rumors about an affair with her boss were just that, rumors. I decided to be straight with him, despite our rocky past. I haven't told anyone outside of my lawyer and my sister, I explained. Not even Lila and Grant know everything I do, and the kids don't have the full picture. John, I have proof, video and audio. This isn't some baseless rumor. John's face fell. What are you going to do? He asked, but I knew he already understood. I'm trying to protect the kids. I can't ignore it, I said, trying to hold back my frustration. John, what would you do if Lila had proof I was cheating? Without hesitation, John replied. I'd want your head on a platter. I'd help her bury you. His eyes filled with tears. What about Logan and Maya? How are they holding up? They're talking to their cousins and each other more than they are to me or Chloe. They're angry with Lila, but I told them they need to speak with her. I just don't know if they have. John sighed. I really thought you were blowing this out of proportion, just reacting to office gossip. My priority is to protect the kids, I said firmly. John nodded. And I'll make sure Lila gets whatever physical help she needs. I don't condone what she's done, but if you have solid proof, I can accept it. Keep me in the loop, Ethan. You're an honorable man. With that, he walked out, his shoulders slumped. I felt more pity for him than I did for Lila. When I got home, Chloe was waiting for me. Wow, she said. So, he knows his daughter isn't as innocent as he thought. We need to tell my parents soon, I replied. How about tomorrow night after my shift? I don't want them feeling like we've kept them in the dark. She agreed. The next evening, we had the unpleasant meeting with my parents. My father only asked if I had proof, and when I said I did, he accepted it. Like John, he was more focused on the kids' well-being than anything else, which made sense. In our family, kids always came first. Adults had to face the fallout, but children needed to be protected and prepared. I didn't receive any more information from my mysterious ally, but that was just fine. I already had 4 explicit videos of Lila and Grant, along with audio recordings that proved their long-term affair. Honestly, I didn't need more evidence. Lila wasn't just a cheater. She'd also been stealing from the family. The mystery of how she managed to save up enough to take a trip to the Cayman Islands without me knowing made my blood boil. She was both a liar and a thief. Max started digging into their accounts, using their social security numbers to ensure we could subpoena bank statements if any money was missing. Some questions were answered the following Wednesday when we gathered to list all our assets. A court-appointed financial arbitrator reviewed everything. I submitted my annual salary and Lila's pay stub. Lila made about $5,000 a month, and my income fluctuated with overtime, but we were pretty close in terms of yearly earnings. Max mentioned that this would likely result in minimal alimony, even without the prenup and the proof of her infidelity. By Monday, the auditor had requested our income tax returns from the last few years. I found mine in our desk at home, while Chloe had to get copies from her accountant. She was upset to discover that Grant hadn't filed theirs with the rest of their documents. Knowing Grant made around $80,000 compared to her $50,000, Chloe was pleased when Max told her she would honorably receive a decent maintenance payment. When Cole Tonks walked into the room with a sulking Grant and an angry Lila, I was caught off guard by Lila's hostility. I had expected some kind of apology, but she kept her mouth shut, honorably following Cole Tonks's advice. Grant, meanwhile, tried his best to keep a straight face, though he wasn't doing a great job. The court officer introduced himself and his assistant, who took notes and kept an electronic record of the proceedings. "Let's get started," the officer said. "Your attorneys have forms for you to sign, confirming that your statements today are true and can be submitted as evidence. Our goal is to compile a list of all assets and income for the judge's review. We won't discuss prenuptial agreements today." He explained how car valuations would be based on the standard Blue Book, and if any vehicles were registered under a child's name, they could be considered separate from the marital estate if both parties agreed. "We'll deal with the money last. Let's begin with Mr. and Mrs. Calhoun." Listing our assets, cars, firearms, the boat, and household items, didn't take long. Even Lila's jewelry wasn't an issue. I had already had it appraised, and its value was higher than my truck and firearms combined. Cole Tonks argued that the solar system should be valued separately and handed over a document showing its depreciation. Max glanced over it, made some notes, and nodded. When we got to the 401k accounts, I asked why they were included, thinking they should be excluded from the division.
"No," Max replied.
"They count since you've been married for over 10 years. But in your case, the values are similar, so it's not a big deal." Next, we went over our checking and savings accounts. Max submitted the statements showing that I had taken 80% of the funds, and Chloe had done the same with Grant. The auditor glanced at the paperwork. "This is fairly straightforward," he said. Then he turned to Grant's attorney. "Mr. Jacobs, there's a significant discrepancy between Mrs. Calhoun's salary estimate and the tax returns from the last 2 years." Grant stiffened. "I estimated her yearly income at around $60,000. I explained. "I just multiplied her monthly pay by 12. "Yes," the auditor said. "But for the last 2 years, Mrs. Calhoun reported an annual income of $140,000. "What the hell?" I blurted out. The assistant taking notes frowned at me. "Didn't you look at your tax returns?" the court officer asked. I shook my head. Lila and Grant had a new accountant handle our taxes electronically. I only looked at the small refund we got each year. Lila turned beet red. "Her salary includes $80,000 in bonuses annually," the officer explained.
I glansde over at Cole Tonks.
"And Mr. Wheeler here has been receiving $110,000 in bonuses," the officer continued. Chloe, stunned, asked, "How much extra is that net?" "About $80,000 a year, totaling around $160,000 between them," the auditor replied. "Where's the money, Lila?" I demanded. "Is that why you flew to the Cayman Islands last Friday? To stash it away?" Lila, clearly rattled, snapped, "How did you know? Have you been following me?" She quickly tried to compose herself. "No need for that," I replied. "You outed yourself. Both you and Chloe insisted the kids install those phone locator apps on their phones. Logan and Maya used it to track you when you weren't answering them on Friday. They saw you pop back up near the coast, which made it obvious you'd been in the Caymans." Lila and Grant looked utterly stunned. "They also checked your office on Monday and saw you weren't there. You were in Baton Rouge, likely transferring money into new accounts," I added.
Max jumped in.
"Cole Tonks will subpoena those account statements. It's illegal to hide assets offshore to avoid dividing joint property. Your clients flew to the Caymans right after hiring you. Hiding assets like this is a felony." Lila started crying, and even Grant looked terrified. Cole Tonks's face went from pale to red in a matter of seconds. "I didn't do anything illegal," he stammered, clearly uncomfortable with the assistant typing everything down. Chloe leaned over to Max. "Can we get them to return the money?"
Max nodded.
"We'll get your share in the end, no matter what. If we have to, we can garnish their paychecks. But once the court proves infidelity, 80% of those accounts will be yours." But there's no money left, Lila wailed. It disappeared when we tried to transfer it. Grant tried to quiet her, but she wasn't stopping. I think you stole it, she accused, pointing at me.
I stjal det her, dumpfundet.
I didn't even know for sure about the money until a few days ago. I suspected something, but I had no idea how much it was. So what are you saying now? Did you blow it all? Or did you lose it? Lila continued, explaining that when they tried to transfer the money from the Grand Cayman Bank, the transaction was denied. They had gone to Baton Rouge to investigate, but the online statement showed the transfer without providing any routing number or account details. Mr. Jacobs, the court officer, chimed in. Give me the bank information for the Baton Rouge account, and I'll investigate. I can get results quicker and file them into the court records. Grant and Lila left the room looking defeated. Chloe turned to me. Where do you think the money went? She asked. I just shrugged, as clueless as she was. Our case moved faster than expected, peak honorably because Lila and Grant were pushing Coltonks to speed things up. They stayed at the Holiday Inn for about a week before moving into the apartment on Victoria Street. I couldn't help but be amused, imagining them holed up in their little love nest, likely struggling with their finances and drowning in Coltonks' legal fees. All 5 kids insisted on attending the hearing, and I agreed. They had every right to be there since the divorce was going to impact them too. Max sat us all down beforehand and explained what to expect. Judge Mason handled family cases in a semi-formal manner, which meant sitting at the table with us instead of a more traditional setup. Max, Chloe, and I sat to Coltonks' left, with Grant and Lila directly across from us. The kids took seats in the gallery behind us. When the judge entered, we stood as Max had instructed, but he quickly waved for us to sit back down. I conduct these hearings in a semi-formal manner, Judge Mason said. You'll speak when I address you. If you want to talk, raise your hand. Be respectful. If you piss me off, I'll throw you out. Got it? The kids nearly lost it, holding back their laughter at his bluntness. I've reviewed both cases, he continued. Normally, we treat them as separate matters, but because the evidence and the parties involved are intertwined, we'll handle them together. In Louisiana, infidelity by itself isn't always grounds for divorce, but with prenuptial agreements involved, it can significantly affect property distribution. So, I'll need solid proof of the alleged infidelity. He went on to address the financial discrepancies. There are allegations of hidden assets. My investigation shows that Mrs. Calhoun and Mr. Wheeler have bank accounts in Baton Rouge with balances of $120,000 and $160,000, respectively. The entirety of those funds was transferred from the accounts the Monday before the divorce petition was filed. The correct passwords and security questions were used, indicating that Mrs. Calhoun and Mr. Wheeler, or someone they authorized, made these transfers. He paused, letting that sink in. Further investigation revealed that the money was divided evenly into 5 accounts belonging to their children: Logan and Maya Calhoun, and Ethan, Trent, and Cynthia Wheeler. These transfers are legal under the Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. The accounts appear to have been set up years ago, likely for education or inheritance purposes in case the parents passed away. I was stunned. Why had Lila made such a fuss over the money if she just handed it over to the kids? The judge continued, "This shows a level of responsibility on the parents' part, though perhaps not much remorse. These deposits are non-refundable unless fraud can be proven. Does anyone here have proof of fraud?" I could barely contain my relief. Sure, I'd been hoping for my 80%, but knowing that the money had gone to the kids was good enough for me. Grant and Lila looked completely blindsided, as if we had outmaneuvered them somehow. When Judge Mason asked if we had any proof of fraud, all of us shook our heads and said, "No, Your Honor." Lila and Grant seemed too scared to even question the judge's remarks. They must have been terrified of being hit with charges for trying to hide money overseas. "The next issue is the custody of the minor children," the judge said. Maya raised her hand. "Yes, Your Honor. I read that children 15 and older can choose which parent they want to live with." "In some states, yes," Judge Mason replied. "In Louisiana, I take the children's opinions into account after speaking with them privately." Maya wasn't backing down. I don't need to talk privately. My mother cheated on my father and betrayed our whole family. I want to live with my dad. Logan immediately stood up and agreed, while Ethan, Trent, and Ellie followed suit, declaring they wanted to live with their mother for the same reasons. Under the table, my heart pounded as I squeezed Chloe's hand. Judge Mason smiled slightly. I'll consider your wishes, but it hasn't been established yet that what you're calling treason actually took place. Maya raised her hand again, and the judge turned toward her. I also read that a 16-year-old can petition for emancipation, and that 17-year-olds can leave home without needing a petition. That's true, the judge replied. The rule for 17-year-olds is an old law for boys who wanted to enlist in the military without their parents' consent. For a 16-year-old to be emancipated, they must be able to financially support themselves. Is that clear? Maya nodded. I've got a college fund with $56,000 in it, plus what my parents and grandparents have added. Ellie stood up and chimed in. Me too. We all have enough money to support ourselves for a while. Her brother Trent grinned and added, Same here. We could rent a nice place together. Logan and Connor stood up next, claiming that if they pooled their money, all 5 of them could live on their own just fine. I glanced at the judge, who looked like he was suppressing a laugh. Let me guess, he said. If I don't agree to your wishes, you'll all petition for emancipation or move out on your own? All 5 of them nodded in unison. Sit down, he commanded. I'll take what you said into consideration. He moved on to the matter of the alleged infidelity, which was critical because it would impact the prenup and how the assets would be split. There's an allegation of infidelity that affects the prenuptial agreement. I need to see evidence.
Max stood.
Your Honor, we have photographic evidence of Mr. Grantard Wheeler and Mrs. Lila Calhoun together. Coltonks immediately objected. Photos can be altered. I've got a picture of myself shaking hands with the president and another of us playing golf, all made by my son as a joke. The defense hasn't identified the source of these images. The judge turned to Max, who gave me a nod to speak up. Your Honor, the evidence was sent to me anonymously. I received several video and audio files, and I took these screenshots from one of the videos. I have the full footage on both a DVD and a thumb drive. I glanced at Lila and Grant. They both looked stunned, their faces turning red as they shook their heads in disbelief. Judge Mason noticed their reaction. Do I need to play the video? Or do both parties agree that infidelity occurred? Coltonks initially requested to see the footage, but when Lila and Grant started panicking, begging the judge not to show the video, he quickly backtracked. Your Honor, could I have a moment with my clients? Coltonks asked. After a brief huddle with Lila and Grant, he reluctantly spoke. We agree with the plaintiff's claims. Well, in that case, I'll announce my verdict, Judge Mason said. Since all parties agree that infidelity occurred, the prenuptial agreements will be upheld. Ethan and Chloe, you are each awarded 80% of the community property. He suggested that we sort out the actual distribution of assets with our attorneys to keep the court from having to handle the nitty-gritty details. For custody, Judge Mason continued, I'm granting full custody of Logan and Maya Calhoun to Ethan, and full custody of Cynthia, Ethan, and David Wheeler to Chloe, as requested. The non-custodial parents will have full visitation rights. He added that the divorce would be finalized in 6 months. Given the higher incomes that Lila and Grant had been hiding, Lila was ordered to pay me $1,000 a month, and Grant had to pay Chloe $2,000 a month for the next 3 years. Additionally, each child would receive $500 a month until they turned 18. Max leaned over and quietly mentioned that we could appeal for higher payments, but I decided against it and Chloe followed my lead. Once the hearing ended, we left the courtroom, with Max promising to schedule a meeting to hammer out the property distribution. I told the kids to head home, change, and get ready for a family meeting. Chloe and I walked toward the back of the courtroom, where my dad was waiting for us. So, when did you figure it out, Dad? I asked. Chloe looked puzzled. It hit me when Maya and Ellie made those comments about the video, I said, turning to her. Pissed Off 999 is a fake identity the kids made up. Chloe's mouth dropped open. No, my dad interrupted. I figured it out a few days ago when I saw an old credit card bill. Logan and Connor came to me about 2 months ago, asking for my credit card to buy something special for your anniversary. They promised to pay me back about $500. The bill showed a charge from an electronics store, and I didn't think much of it at the time. But when I called the company, they told me the kids bought cell phone bugs. Wait, the kids spent $500 on spy gear? I asked, shocked. Yes, apparently they're not cheap, Dad replied. He didn't know where they got the video cameras from, but he had followed me home to find out more. When we walked into the living room, all 5 kids were sitting there, waiting for us. They immediately went quiet as we entered. Let's move to the kitchen and sit down, I said. Chloe grabbed 3 beers from the fridge, handing one to my dad and one to me. Logan and Connor grinned, holding out their hands. You might be old enough to play spy, but you're not old enough to drink, I said, smirking. They shrugged, knowing I wasn't really mad. All right, I said, taking a seat. Who wants to start? Let's hear the whole story. From the beginning. Maya jumped in first. It all started when Ellie and I went to my mom's office, and neither she nor Uncle Grant were there. This was around the time they started phase 2 of the COVID lockdown. We thought maybe we could get some money from one of them to go to the movies, but the receptionist told us they'd been gone for a while. It was well past lunchtime, she continued. So we used the phone locator app Mom had us install on our phones. The tracker showed they were at some weird address. We decided to check it out and found it was an apartment building. When we got there, we saw Uncle Grant's car parked outside. We waited, and soon they came out, walking hand in hand, smiling. She paused, letting it sink in. That got us thinking, so we started tracking them every day. For 3 days straight, they went back to that same apartment and stayed there for about an hour and a half each time. Sometimes they'd even go late at night after work, before heading home. That's when we told the boys. Connor picked up the story. We started doing some research online and found these cell phone bugs you can install after downloading an app. They work like a continuous phone call, picking up everything going on around the phone without interfering with regular calls. The only downside is it drains the battery faster. We convinced Pop to let us use his credit card to buy them, Connor admitted. Sorry for lying about why we needed it. Installing the bugs and the app on their phones was easy. We all took turns checking the audio and listening in. Anything interesting we recorded, and that's how we got those audio files. I leaned forward, still stunned. But how did you get the video footage? And how did you figure out which apartment they were using? Logan answered that one. We noticed both Mom and Uncle Grant had keys marked 201, but that wasn't their office number. So, I copied my mom's key, and we snuck into the apartment a few times to look around. Maya continued, we realized we needed cameras, so we bought some small ones with a transmitter. Trent jumped in, excited. Yeah, the cameras were motion sensitive, so they didn't use too much battery. We hid the receiver under the couch, and it sent the video to our receiver at home. They all looked proud of themselves, but I couldn't help but feel torn. They had recorded something that destroyed 2 marriages, and yet they were just kids trying to protect their family. So you recorded video of Lila and Grant, I said slowly, and also sent me some of the audio files. They all nodded, looking a little sheepish now. I took a deep breath. These were my kids, my nieces, and nephews. I couldn't get too angry with them, but there was another issue looming in my mind, money. Maya spoke up again. When Ellie and I first saw that apartment, we realized our mom wasn't just cheating on you. She was living a double life. She had clothes stashed there and a makeup kit, towels, and washcloths. We figured out they'd work out, shower, and then go home like nothing was wrong. Her face hardened as she spoke. They weren't just cheating you and Aunt Chloe. They were cheating us too. Ellie nodded in agreement. And then we found the bank account papers. It wasn't hard to figure out how to access them online. We spent a lot of time snooping around in both Dad and Aunt Lila's offices. Trent added, yeah, a few times. The receptionist even let us wait for them in the office when they weren't around. I sat back, speechless for a moment. The kids had unraveled everything, Lila and Grant's affair, the secret apartment, and even the hidden bank accounts. They'd done what I hadn't been able to. We went through a ton of folders, Maya began, and finally found one in the bottom drawer of Dad's desk with some applications. Then we checked Aunt Lila's office and found more papers. Aunt Lila had a small notebook in her purse with all sorts of passwords in it. It didn't say secret bank account or anything obvious, but we could tell the password was different from the one she used for her phone. And, sure enough, it worked. It took us a while to figure out, but they were using the same password for both accounts. Logan took charge of the explanation. Once we realized they were hiding money, we got really angry. We started wondering if they were dealing drugs or embezzling from the company. That's when Trent came up with the idea to move the money into our accounts. Trent blushed. I just thought, we can't let Dad and Aunt Lila get Grant while leaving us behind. We'd been reading about how assets are split in a divorce, and the thought of them keeping half the money didn't sit right with us. We had accounts set up by Pop for college, and I thought, why not just take the money? I figured, since we were minors and it was technically our parents' money, we wouldn't get in too much trouble if anyone found out. Maya spoke up again, this time with a little regret. If we'd known about the 80-20 split, we honorably wouldn't have taken it. But honestly, it worked out better this way. So then you started sending me the videos and audio files? I asked, looking around the table. I was relieved to see some restraint in their faces instead of pride. That was the hardest part, Logan admitted. We were furious at Mom and Uncle Grant for what they were doing to all of us. We didn't want to hurt you and Aunt Chloe, but we couldn't just sit there and do nothing. So we sent you that first video hoping it'd push you to confront them. We knew you were upset. If you'd gone for the gun in the safe, we would have told you everything. We knew you'd tell Aunt Sue too. By then, we had already moved the money Mom was hiding. Logan sighed. We stole it. We knew it, but we figured they cheated us, so it was only fair. I glanced at Chloe, who had been sitting there in shock since the beginning. I just hope you kids never get mad at me or Aunt Sue, I said with a small smile. If you ever nail me like you did your Mom and Grant, I'll knock you into next week, even if I'm using a walker in a nursing home, I joked. The kids chuckled at my empty threat. Don't worry, Dad, Maya said, smiling. You've never let the family down. We Cajuns stick together. One thing I don't get, my dad chimed in. You bought cell phone bugs with my credit card, but where did you get the money for the video cameras? Logan answered confidently. They were expensive, about $500 each. The cameras recorded full video with sound and had built-in motion and sound detectors. We bought 5 of them, plus another $500 each for the hidden transmitter that sent the signal to Maya's computer, added Connor. All in all, it was about $3,500 plus shipping. But we can get half of that money back if we return everything undamaged. We've already pulled the cameras and the transmitter out. I was still processing all of this. What about the credit card? I don't have a Visa. Logan looked a little sheepish. Well, we do now. I applied for one in your name and forged your signature. At least he wasn't looking too guilty. It has a $10,000 limit. We get the mail every day, so it was easy to keep hidden. Maya jumped in. Ellie and I set up the email account. Pissed off 999. Connor came up with the name because he was so angry about what Mom and Uncle Grant were doing. The kids all nodded, clearly pleased with how impressed Chloe, Dad, and I were. So, the bugs in their phones are still active? I asked. Trent nodded. Yep, as long as their phone batteries are charged. With the phone locator app, we know exactly where they are and what they're doing. He beamed, happy he wasn't in trouble. If they're on a call, we can hear it. The bugs are voice-activated, so we mostly hear car noises and work talk. We all took turns reviewing the files, picking out anything important. I realized that their eavesdropping had given us a huge advantage. I want access to those recordings, I said. Thanks to those audio files, Chloe and I were able to anticipate Lila and Grant's demands when we met for the property division. Lila was so desperate to get her jewelry back that she handed over most of the cash and all the household goods. We gave in on a few points without much fuss, but we made them grovel for it. Chloe shocked everyone, except me, when she suggested they walk through town with signs saying, "We cheated on our spouses. The alternative was appealing the alimony and child support amounts. I thought Cole Tonks was going to pass out at the suggestion. We overheard him telling Lila and Grant they got off easy with the child support payments, and he warned them that Chloe and I could appeal. Eventually, Chloe recanted, but not before forcing both of them to apologize on their knees. I'm still not entirely sure how it happened, but I swear I had nothing to do with it. 2 months after our hearing, Lila and Grant's insurance company discovered that Grant had used company funds to rent an apartment for their affair. Apparently, Lila had been getting inflated premiums for 2 years, and Grant managed to secure hefty bonuses. No one ever figured out exactly why. Once that came to light, the company fired both of them. There was no big scandal, they just didn't want the bad publicity. Thankfully, none of the videos ever made it online. Chloe and I didn't care much either way, though we joked over beers that it would have been amusing to make them stars. But the kids didn't want the embarrassment, and we understood. Lila and Grant moved to New Orleans, working for a small shipping company now. Since leaving town, they've hardly ever visited the kids or even called. The last I heard, they were struggling to keep up with child support and alimony payments. I wish them well, or maybe not.